closing argument?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. May it please the court and counsels. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So, wow. I guess I should have sent a retainer agreement, sent a fee agreement to all these guys. Because apparently they're all on trial today. According to the state, you just heard about 7 crimes that were committed. Not one by Tyler Jackson. You heard about Jabari and Ryan and all these other guys. They're not on trial today. The information that the judge read to you, the charging document, charges 1 crime and 1 person with that crime. Tyler Jackson is charged with possessing a firearm after being a juvenile delinquent who committed an act that would have been a felony if he was an adult and he was under 24. And we stipulated, we don't have to, but we agreed, let's not waste time. He's under 24. Let's not waste time. He committed that act in the past. But we did not stipulate, we did not agree that he possessed a firearm. All these other guys that are on here, on this poster board, none of them are sitting there with their liberty at stake. But you would think they were if you listen to the state. What the state has to prove today is not that these guys are committing crimes. What the state has to prove, first and foremost, before you go anywhere else, is not that Tyler Jackson's a member of Y&R. They have to prove that he possessed a firearm, that it was a real firearm. That firearm that they say my client had in his possession, they say it was real. It wasn't fired. No matter what their expert wants to say about, oh, there's scratching there, that must have been the serial number. It's not a serial number. I asked they call him Detective Barboni. I call him Mr. Barboni, the CEO of Barboni and Associates. They asked him, I asked him, does a real firearm have a serial number? Yes. Does this one have a serial number in the video? No. Does a real firearm have a firing pin? Yes. Is there a firing pin in the video? No. But I'm 100% sure it's a real firearm. 100% sure. It must be a real firearm. Oh, there was trigger discipline or finger discipline. Yeah, these guys know all about finger discipline and trigger discipline. You know, that was the meeting of Phi Beta Kappa you were watching there. It's a bunch of idiots running around town at the Jacksonville Fair, having what they consider to be fun. It doesn't mean that they were committing criminal acts together for the purposes of enhancing their gang. But let's go back to the firearm. In the video, counsel said that firearms for gang members are like baseball gloves. Well, let me take out my baseball glove. Put my baseball glove there. What? It's not a baseball. Y'all are saying that's an iPhone, not a baseball glove. Oh, don't worry about it. I can prove to you that this is a baseball glove. What I'm going to do is I am going to look all around the state, all around the country. I'm going to find somebody who says he is an expert in saying that iPhones are baseball gloves. Now, he may be the only person in the country that certifies himself as an expert in that field, and he may be the only person who is capable of teaching others. He learned from the internet, but by golly, I'll find that expert to say that this is a baseball glove, and I'll just have to pay him $500 a day to do so. Bet for an extra $500 this becomes a catcher's mitt. In your jury instructions, you're going to be given one about weighing the evidence. And it tells you things you should consider about how witnesses acted, what they said. Some of the things you should consider are, number 6, has the witness been offered or received any money, preferred treatment, or other benefit in order to get the witness to testify? Ask yourselves that about the CEO of Barberini and Associates. Hello, Sheriff of Palm Beach County. Sorry, I can't come into work today. I got to go up to Jacksonville and make my $500 a day and say that thing is 100% a firearm. How much does that firearm cost? Well, it could be anywhere from $600, $1,200. I don't know, though, because I looked locally in Palm Beach County and couldn't find any of the firearms, any of that firearm. Oh, by the way, here's my demonstrative aid, the firearm. Where'd you get that from? Please understand, my client's not on trial for committing first-degree murder, as was implied. He did a music video. Is that a music video that I would spend my money on? Absolutely not. Do I think the language, do I think the theme is disgusting? Yeah. But he's not on trial for making a music video that would offend some segments of our society, including me. He's on trial for possessing a real firearm in that video. Not firearms in any other videos. That video, that alleged firearm. Now, we had Detective Berry on. And even though he's a young guy, Detective Berry, very young guy he looks like, he reminded me of my late father. Take the trash out, Kevin. Why? Why can't my brother do it? Because I said so. Why is he a member of Y&R? Because he's documented. Why is he documented? Because I said so. How do you get into Y&R? We have to get documented. Yeah, no. You get documented after you're in the gang. How you get in? I don't know. Okay, you're the gang expert that's been called. And your job is to know everything there is about gangs. Sir, what's it mean to be blessed into a gang? I never heard that expression before. He knew about getting beaten into a gang. Sir, what evidence do you have that Mr. Jackson committed any crimes with the rest of these guys? Well, I don't really have any. So then we hear from a sergeant, we hear from a couple other people, we see the guy on Zoom, right? Well, yeah, Tyler Jackson, I arrested him. Oh, I charged him. Charged him, sergeant. You've been a police officer for 16 years. Can police officers charge people? Well, no. Only the state attorney can, correct? Yeah. Did the state attorney charge my client in this case? No. Was my client charged in any of the cases that those folks talked about? No. Okay, but it all sounds good. Now, here's where it gets interesting. They try their case the way they want to try their case. I try my case the way I want to try my case. They have to prove beyond and to the exclusion of each and every reasonable doubt that Tyler Jackson was under 24. We helped them out with that. We agreed that Tyler Jackson committed acts when he was a juvenile that would be a felony if he was an adult. We stipulated to that. But where we didn't help them out was whether or not it was a firearm. How could they prove it was a real firearm? Well, they called a witness. Everybody remember Mr. Dozier? also known as Montana Shot Ya, or something like that. He got on that witness stand. He identified himself as the producer and the director of that music video. Producer means he's in charge. He knows, he's responsible for everything. And I asked him questions. Do you see Tyler Jackson? There's Tyler over there. Mr. Dozier looked sick to his stomach that he was here having to testify for the prosecution. But there he was. To his credit, he showed up. Got two more questions that we could have asked Mr. Dozier, maybe a couple more. Mr. Dozier, you're the producer, you're in charge of everything. Where did the firearm that we see in Mr. Jackson's hands on the video come from? Wasn't asked that. Here's another good question. Mr. Dozier, was that a real firearm? Yes or no? The answer is no. Not good for the state. If the answer is yes, not good for the guy sitting over there. But if the answer is yes, the next question is, Mr. Dozier, was Tyler Jackson made aware that it was, in fact, a real firearm? That question wasn't asked either. Now, coming from that witness stand, that's called testimony. Testimony is evidence. Remember what we said in jury instruction. I don't have to do anything. Neither does Tyler. All we have to do is show up, which we have, and behave ourselves, which I hope we have. That's all we have to do. We don't have to get up in cross-examination and ask those questions that the state didn't ask. We don't have to elicit that testimony, that evidence. The state does. That was low-hanging fruit there with Mr. Dozier. Sir, you're in charge of the whole thing. Is it a real firearm or not? Question was never asked. That evidence is lacking. Now, this gang enhancement is kind of a tricky little thing, because if you find him not guilty of possessing the firearm, you only worry about the gang enhancements. If you do, then you have to decide whether or not dancing around looking like an idiot on a video was to enhance the gang. The gang expert, Detective Berry. Sir, have you spoken to any gang members who were aware of this video, and what did it do to them? Were they now frightened? Were they now scared of the Y&R? Are the 30 rollers, the Crips, going to close up shop? Where are the ATK boys? They must be scared to death. What evidence do you have that says anything they did on that video was for the purposes of promoting or enhancing the gang? You have no evidence. This case, the crime is alleged to have happened in 2018. You heard from two detectives in this case, one of whom was deemed a gang expert. They don't have to stop investigating. So, 3.5 years later, this is what they bring to court and what they do not bring to court. And it's the state's job to make sure a sufficient amount of evidence is, in fact, brought to court to prove the case. I'd like to give you an example of reasonable doubt, if I may. Reasonable doubt, your jury instruction will tell you that reasonable doubt can come from the evidence itself, lack of evidence, conflict in evidence. And if you have a reasonable doubt, your verdict should be not guilty. If you have no reasonable doubt, then your verdict should be guilty. No reasonable doubt, your verdict should be guilty. Now, one juror may have reasonable doubt on one issue, another juror may have reasonable doubt on another issue. That part doesn't matter. If you have a reasonable doubt, your verdict should be not guilty. So let me give you a couple of examples, or one example that maybe will help with reasonable doubt. Let's say that you as a jury are tasked with finding out how I came into the courtroom today. You all came in through the back. I was over there with everybody else. We're all standing up. How did I get into the courtroom today? Well, I'm going to give you a couple scenarios. One is I parked my car, came over here to the courthouse, went through security, went to the elevator, went to the 5th floor, and kept walking down the hall through that doorway. I came in and took my seat. Does that sound like a possible way that I got into the courtroom? Yes. Does it sound reasonable? Yes. What would be another way I could get here? Come in, go through security, take the escalators up to the 5th floor, get off the escalator, and come here and walk through the door. Is that possible? Is that reasonable? What would be a third way? Come in, go through security, go find the stairwell, and walk 5 flights of steps to the floor, open the door, and come here to the courtroom. Is it possible? Yes. Is it reasonable? Well, if you know me real well, no, it's not reasonable. I'm not taking 5 flights of steps. But it is, in fact, a reasonable way to get up the steps to the 5th floor and come to the courtroom. Here's the 4th scenario. I park my car, I go over to the JEA project that's being built next door, and I say to one of the guys there, hey, can you guys get me a ladder or put me up on one of those riser things and put me up on the roof of the courthouse? Sure, buddy, not a problem. I get up to the roof of the courthouse, I figure out where the air conditioning vents are, or whatever, for this particular courtroom, and I lower myself down. Is that possible? Yes. Is it ridiculous? Yes. Is it reasonable? No. But your other 3 scenarios about how I got into this courtroom, and if all 3 were presented to you, you would have reasonable doubt as to how I got into the courtroom. Because every single one is possible, every single one is reasonable, and they conflict with each other. Now, is it possible that what my client was holding in that video, Murder 1, was in fact a firearm? Yes! Yes, it's possible. Is it reasonable to believe that? Yes! But what if it wasn't real? It doesn't have a serial number. It doesn't have a firing pin. It doesn't have a cap. Is it possible that it was not a real firearm? Yes. Is it reasonable to believe that? Yes. Especially knowing that this young man who is moving himself up in the world with these videos could not risk possessing a firearm and putting it out there in public, because he would end up sitting right there and basically ruining his future and everything else he's been trying to do. So is it reasonable to believe that could be a firearm? Yes. Is it reasonable to believe it is not a real firearm? Yes. Conflicts in the evidence, evidence itself, and the lack of evidence, Mr. Dozier, it's all there. It's reasonable doubt. Now, here comes the really, really tough part. You're sitting back there, y'all are talking, you're an individual juror, and you have some reasonable doubt. But by God, what if I'm wrong? What if it's a real firearm? Oh my goodness. But the instruction said the state has to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. What do I do? I'm asking you to do something that you may personally find to be distasteful. I'm asking you to do something that you don't feel good about. I'm asking you that if you have a reasonable doubt, to do the right thing and find my client not guilty. We talked about this during jury selection. I forgot who it was that asked me, somebody over there on that side of the room. And I said, well, ma'am, we don't put pillowcases over people's heads and throw stones at them in a soccer stadium just because the government says they're guilty, they're bad. We make the government, we make the state of Florida, we make the sovereign prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. And we do that because 250 40-plus years ago in my hometown of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. A group of men with a lot more courage than I could ever have, backed by their wives, met and with a firm reliance on the divine providence, pledged to each other their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor, so that a young man like this can come in here and have a jury decide whether or not the state has proven their case beyond and to the exclusion of each and every reasonable doubt. I told you, my job is to make them do their job. They're very nice people, but they have failed to carry their burden. Please find my client not guilty. Thank you.